Hey everyone, it's Erica with Mappy Hour. Super excited to have you all joining today for our next Maker Series giveaway and introducing our next maker. Real quick to kick us off, I just wanted to share a bit about Mappy Hour and our Maker Series. So this year we've worked with Sierra Nevada to find makers in all of our Mappy Hour communities across the country. Many of our talented Mappy Hour members are also talented makers, and so we really wanted to, with this project, showcase some of the creative people that we have in our network. And a lot of folks in our network are doing their creative endeavors kind of part-time in addition to their full-time jobs, just like we all are adventurers kind of on the side in addition to our full-time jobs. So I'm really excited and thankful for Sierra Nevada to continue supporting us with our Maker Series. So today I'm super excited to bring on Michelle. She's based in the LA area and is an embroidery creator and has created some really great Mappy Hour products for our giveaway this year, and also is here just to talk about her creative process, how they go about making the patches and the embroidery that they give away and sell at different events and in their community. So without further ado, I'm bringing on Michelle. Hey,
Hello.
Michelle.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Super good. Really happy to have you here. So yeah, I gave like a very brief intro to who you are and what you do, but maybe just to start as we always do, could you introduce yourself? Who are you? What brand did you create and what do you do?
Yes, of course. I'm Michelle, and I'm the creator, maker, and everything behind Stitchback Stories. Stitchback Stories initially started me just making patches inspired by my outdoor adventures. I'm a full-time graphic designer, and I went to design school, so I kind of took my background in design and my love for outdoors and making and combined them together. And so I made patches of some of my favorite places, national parks, just fun hiking outdoor phrases, and started from there. And then once I got better at embroidering, it expanded into making clothes, beanies, accessories, and even some stuff for my hiking gear.
That's awesome. When you're making a patch, like what is that process like? Are you coming up with a design similar to like how you might design something for your graphic design work? And like, are you actually stitching yourself kind of what that patch looks like? What is that process like?
Yeah, I think my background in graphic design really helped me to have that patience to embroider. So it always starts with an idea, and that usually comes from a fun story that I have from like backpacking or camping. It's usually something that went wrong, or maybe like a hardship I went through, or just like a really fun time that I had. And so I'll think about that story and think about how I felt, or think about like what I saw that I think is visually really fun. And I'll start with sketching the design just on either, pencil and paper, or sometimes on my iPad. Once I like that, I bring that to the computer and I refine it. And then from the computer, I bring it to an embroidery software, and that's where I like do the digitizing, which is the process of taking art and making it into an embroidery file. And then from there, I load it up onto my machine, and then there's a whole other thing there, setting up your embroidery hoops and gathering the thread and testing the design out. But for the actual stitching, the machine does all the work. But it does differ from like mass-produced patches where they just have factory rooms of embroidery machines that are the size of an entire room, stitching out like hundreds of patches at once, whereas like I have a fun little home hobby machine and I stitch them out from my own room.
Very cool. I mean, does that play, on your site and some of what I've heard about your work, like sustainability and making kind of your products more mindfully, and to hear about like just mass produced patches, like I'm curious how your smaller kind of more homegrown effort to create these products might hit that sustainability box, but I'm curious if there's other things or if you wanted to elaborate on that, if my suspicion is correct.
Yeah, of course. I think as someone who loves outdoors, sustainability is important, and I hope it is for all of us. And so one of my favorite things about being a small, like homegrown brand is that in itself allows me to be sustainable. I have a separate full-time job, so there's no pressure to make a certain amount of money or make a certain amount of products. It's me in my home studio, as I like to call it, doing what I enjoy doing, and reaching out to a community of like-minded people. And then I have control over the whole process of what I make. So every single material that I order, I'm able to do the research of where it comes from and trying to find the best possible, most sustainable material. And so, whether it's like finding organic cotton to embroider on, or just using scraps from other projects, and finding threads that have different sustainability certifications, I'm able to make that decision for every step of the process, and I like to make sure that each step is thought out.
Very interesting. Well, I'm curious too, like Stitchback Stories, you kind of mentioned like storytelling based on like what you've experienced and how that might inspire your work. But what is the, what is the story behind Stitchback Stories? How did that name come up, and what role does storytelling play with what you do?
Yep. So when I was younger, I have a childhood friend who introduced me to craft fairs. And so we went to our first craft fair together, like before we had driver's license, and it was like when our parents had to drop us off. And we just had so much fun. And I've always been kind of a creative person. I've always enjoyed making stuff, and it was always my dream to do a craft fair. And so early on, me and that friend would work on different brands, and we had a lot of fun naming every little brand that we ever try. Like, we were knitting hats, or, like I was like sewing pillows. And so we always worked together to think of a fun name, and she was so good at it. She was always like, she would put words that matched our goals into like Google Translate and try to see like what fun languages have like prettier words. And so I knew that when I wanted to start Stitchback Stories, like she was the person to go to. And one of the words that she came up with was stitchback. And she was like, it's like a play on the word switchback, but you're like stitching. So I was like, oh, that's really fun. And then I wanted the name a little bit cuter. And, the whole idea behind Stitchback Stories is that I wanted to tell outdoor stories, and I wanted to tell, talk about my adventures. And so I just added the stories to become Stitchback Stories. And when I started making the patches, and I have some with me, every single patch, so it has a design, and then there's a story on the back. So each design has a different story. So for this one, for arches, I'm talking about my experience hiking up to Delicate Arch. And so, and some of them are just, this one just says toasty, and I'm talking about one of my favorite times around the campfire. And so all of them have a little story on the back.
That's so cool. I've never seen anything like that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I was looking at your site and kind of learning a little bit more about your work, and I noticed on there that you've really were influenced at a younger age, I think, about exploring the outdoors and getting outside from your family, and more specifically your dad. And so, and whatever you'd like to share, I'd love to learn more about that inspiration that you drew from your family and him, and really what made you an outdoor lover.
Yeah, I'm happy to share this. So I grew up in a very outdoorsy family, and that was thanks to my dad. Pretty much any 3-day holiday that was out there, like 4th of July, Labor Day, Memorial Day, I remember camping with my family. And I grew up in the LA area, so we did trips to like Yosemite, Sequoia, Kings Canyon, but we also did a ton of road trips, up to Big Sur. We did Yellowstone, went to Arizona, Nevada, Utah. So we were always road tripping and camping. But unfortunately, my dad passed away when I was 15. And I remember like that first summer after he was sick, among many other emotions and feelings I was going through, I realized like, oh, this is the first summer where I'm kind of bored. It was like, oh, I realized like, oh, this is what boredom is, because we weren't going out on our adventures. And so I think that's when I realized like how much of an impact my dad had on me and my family. And I think after he passed away, I was I didn't do any camping for a while. I wasn't hiking. I wasn't doing any of that because I didn't think I was capable. The first time we actually went on a family camping trip, I realized I was like, I don't even know how to pitch a tent, like a basic tent with just 2 cross poles. You know, I have 2 older siblings and lots of older cousins, and it was whether it was my siblings, cousins, or my dad pitching the tent, I never pitched a tent. I never started a campfire, and I was like, I've been outdoors my whole life, and I was like, I have no skills. And I kind of accepted that that's how it was going to be. I was like, oh, I don't have my dad to show me these things anymore. And I was like, I don't have like a male figure or someone stronger than me to take me. And so I kind of thought that was it. But of course it wasn't, because it was already in my blood. And so many years later, I decided to go on my first backpacking trip with my sister and one of my best gal friends. And it was one of the scariest outdoors experience, just because it was kind of a new experience for me. And since then, like, I haven't stopped, and it's been a fun way for me to connect with my dad. Like, whenever I go on road trips or when I'm camping alone, I kind of remember that foundation he built for me. And then just a fun side story. So this just a couple weeks ago is actually the 10-year anniversary of his passing. And so me and 2 of my siblings decided to hike up Half Dome in Yosemite, which is such a hard hike, but was one of my dad's favorite hikes. So the story that my aunts tell me is that so my dad immigrated from Korea to the US, and, you know, didn't know much about Yosemite when he first came, but when he first heard about Half Dome, he had to go hike it. And the story goes is that he went with 1 water bottle and 1 granola bar, and it's like a 16, 17-mile all-day hike sort of thing. And so, yeah, and every time we went to Yosemite, he always went up. He always took, you know, people from our church or relatives. He always took people up with him. And he said, like, when you're older, like, we can go up together. And I never got to do it with him, but, you know, just earlier this summer, I got to do it with my siblings, with a lot more water and a lot more food. And so that's kind of the impact that he's had on my outdoor life.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
I imagine maybe there's going to be a Half Dome patch at some point, if there's not already.
I do. There is a Half Dome patch.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. And do you know how your dad was influenced by getting outside? Was that something he also learned from family members or friends?
I actually don't know, and that could be a good question for my mom. But I think it's really cool to see someone who's like new to a country and, you know, see how much he loved to explore it, because a lot of my other like Korean American friends who also have parents that immigrated here, they kind of just stay in the area, right? They stay within their Korean community, stay where they're comfortable, and haven't got to see like much of what we can explore here. And so I think it's really cool that he went out there. I don't know if it was out of his comfort zone or anything, but luckily he has 5 sisters, and all 5 of them and, you know, their husbands also enjoyed camping. And so it's something our whole family always did together.
Yeah, that's super, super cool.
Yeah.
I grew up in a not so outdoorsy family. And so most of my parents' time were just like sitting at my soccer game or something. But they're still confused about what I'm doing cooking, you know, on a propane stove in the middle of the woods.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So that's super cool that your family is like, you know, that's something they love to do together, and you can do that with your siblings still today. Super cool. So, you know, besides drawing on like, you know, what inspired you in the past, like looking ahead, when you're thinking about creating a new patch or a product, like where do you draw inspiration today? You know, obviously there's probably some things that you've experienced or remembering your dad or going out on adventures in the past that you want to document and embroider. But I'm curious if there's anything that you search for when you're creating a new project that's happening in your life now, or what you go out and seek to really get inspired.
Yeah, I think one of the fun things about this is that I don't think I will ever run out of inspiration. You know, just like There's so much inspiration in the places that I've been growing up, and then like as I get older and I explore more, there's like an infinite amount of places to explore, and as I continue to explore, there's going to be an infinite amount of stories. And so one thing that I got really into since making patches is like backpacking. I've like dabbled in it a little bit, but I think in the last 2 years, like backpacking has become one of my favorite things, and it's also been a way for me to make friends. Anyone I take backpacking, no matter how bad the experience it was, no matter how hard it was, they always say I would do this again.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of my favorite things to do. And so I think there's an endless amount of places I can go backpacking and explore, and there's always like new hobbies to pick up through the outdoors, whether it's like rock climbing, kayaking, just anything out there. I'm like always open to try any of that. And then also in the pandemic, I learned to like make my own gear. So like you interviewed Liv, who him and his wife make their own gear, and that community of like make your own gear is something I discovered during the pandemic, and it's one of my favorite communities that I've discovered, because it's people who like to sew but also like the outdoors, and they combine that together. And I was like, I thought that was so niche, and it's cool to see there's so many people who do that. And so one of my embroidered projects was inspired by backpacking, and so I got to make my own backpacking backpack, and that was inspired by like one of my favorite hikes. And so the design was like inspired by the hike I went to, and then I use those colors to pick the colors for my backpack. So I think there's just like an endless amount of places for inspiration.
That's so cool. Super cool. I mean, yeah, I went bike packing recently for the first time, and I realized some of the gear I used for backpacking that I tried to attach to my bike was like maybe not the best fit. And so we're kind of thinking too, like, should we try to make our own like bike frame bag or something? So yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah, it's cool
the
to
bike
remember,
frame
like,
bag,
yeah, we have the ability. Hopefully I could learn how to do these things.
You can definitely learn. I think that community people are just so nice and so helpful. And I think they have like beginner tutorials for bike packs.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, speaking of products, I have some photos I'd love to share with the community who's tuning in and tunes in later. But talking about some of what you are graciously you created for the Mappy Hour community to give away. Let me pull up the photos here. So just for folks, tuning in or who catch this in time, today is our last day of our giveaway. Michelle made a Mappy Hour patch and a beanie and a shirt to go along with this little gift pack of really cool gear for our community. So if you want to talk a little bit about how you came up with this and what it is, I'd love to hear about it because they're super cool.
Yeah, Sarah from Mappy Hour reached out to me about this project, and I think I was referred by All Men's, right? Just because we're both in that like make your own gear community. And she said she wanted to put the logo on a few different things. And so, yeah, the beanie, the shirt, and the patch was totally her idea. I gave her some options for colors, and this is what we decided. I think it's super fun and cute. For the actual patch itself, I would say this was one of my more challenging embroidery projects, just because usually when I design embroidery patches, I do it with embroidery in mind. So I designed the illustration knowing that, okay, this is going to be easy to embroider. And so this is like one of the few projects that I took on that was like somebody else's logo. And so, yeah, we actually went through a few test runs of colors. And the thing about embroidery, it's not like a computer. It's not a perfect vector illustration. There's stitches that draw the image, and you can determine what those stitches look like whether they're going up and down or diagonally, and that completely changes the way the look of the embroidery looks like. And so we went through a couple iterations of them, and then this was the final product.
Yeah, it's so cool. I imagine the topography on that map is very detailed.
Yeah.
So you can only imagine. Let's see. So we have, can you talk a little bit about your sewing machine and setup and kind of what we're seeing here?
Yeah, so I actually have two embroidery machines, and then this is my sewing machine. So the
Mm.
embroidery machine is going to stitch out the actual designs, and those essentially look like a sewing machine, except bigger. They're usually longer, but they're built from the same base and technology as a sewing machine. And then once I do embroidery, for some instances, it'll be just a patch and then they're done. But for a lot of the products I make, I like to sew the embroidery onto something else. So this is a completed patch, and then I'm using my sewing machine to sew the patch onto the beanie.
Cool. That's awesome. And then I think, yeah, kind of just a different view of you actually doing it.
Yep.
Do you work, is this is this your studio space that you use? Like, how do you, like, what does that consist of? What is your studio like?
Yeah. So when I first started, my studio was my closet. The room that I was in, or the apartment that I was in, and I had roommates. I was living in Virginia at the time, but I had like a decent sized closet. It was a small walk-in closet, but it fit
Mhm.
my embroidery machines perfectly, and they kind of just sat on the ground in my closet, and I stitched it out from there. And then when I would clean up the patches, I would do it on my desk in my room. And then from there, I moved to DC, and I, found some awesome roommates in a really big house that had a big room that was affordable. And so half the room was my bed and my sleeping area, and the other half was just all my embroidery stuff. And again, I put my machine like in the closet. This one was a smaller closet, but the machine fit perfectly in there. And then, I would have just my regular work desk that I also use for my full-time job to do any of other like sewing or cleaning up the patches. And then more recently, I got kind of just an unexpected job offer in LA that moved me back to my hometown. And so I haven't decided like where in LA I want to live, or, I don't know, like what neighborhood I want to go to, or any of
Mm.
that. So immediately I was like, I'm just going to go live with my mom because she has the room. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, right now I'm just pretty much in my bedroom, and again, one embroidery machine's in a closet and one finally made its way to a desk.
Nice. I mean, you gotta work with what you got.
Right.
But that's also, yeah, congrats on the job offer.
Yeah.
Um, cool. I'm going to take this down, but thanks so much I mean, I'm super excited to pick one of these up myself.
Yeah.
But very, very cool. A few more things before we jump off. What do you find most rewarding about what you do? I think, I'm super inspired and like want to try and figure out how I can find all these stories on these patches, because that to me seems inspirational, but like, so you've inspired me. But I'm curious what you find most rewarding about what you do.
I would say two things. One, just being able to create something is so fun. Seeing something from an idea to a finished product it's just fun. I've always loved making stuff. And so, to kind of see my process in design and creating is really exciting. And then just that journey as a creative from where I started to where I've come is really rewarding. I got into all the creative stuff because I learned to sew when I was in like middle school. And oddly enough, it was something my dad suggested to me, because one day I tried hand sewing something and he was like, why don't you get a sewing machine? He was like, let's invest in it. And so I got a sewing machine, and then I learned to make clothes, and then I realized like I really love to make stuff. And so when I was like figuring out what I want to do with my life, I was like, well, I don't want to go to fashion school because that doesn't fit my personality, but I love to make stuff. So I tried graphic design, and I remember being really anxious because I was like, I have no artistic skills. Like, I didn't know how to draw or
Mhm.
paint or any of that. And I felt like everybody was more creative than me, and I didn't know what I was doing. But I worked really, really hard, and I did my best in school, and I tried really, really hard to learn to be a designer. And then once I finished school, I realized like I got to take everything that I've learned from growing up to in school and bring all those skills together to make Stitchback Stories and to make the products that I'm making now.
Super cool. Um, yeah, I think it's probably hard for a lot of makers, especially when they're first starting, to like feel like they have the confidence or like build up the confidence, or we hear this thing called imposter syndrome. It's like, how do you get past that? So actually really segues into my like kind of ending question here, which for other makers in our community or elsewhere, like what is your advice to people who are maybe starting a new creative passion or in it and still struggling or trying to figure out their next move? Like, what is your advice for them?
Yeah, I think my number one advice in general is to never feel like it's too late to start something, because it really isn't. And everybody starts from somewhere, and it's really hard to see what others are creating and to feel like they're doing better than you. But like, time will be your best friend. And if you're interested in something, go for it. It doesn't need to be the most beautiful thing, and you don't have to have the best thing, as long as you're enjoying doing what you do. If it can be really hard when you're creative, because everybody wants to give you advice about starting a business and how to outsource and how to grow your brand and all that stuff. And all that stuff just becomes work. And if that's not what you're looking for and you just want to be creative and have fun, like nothing else matters. You just do what you want to do and you try new things and you have fun with it.
Super helpful. Yeah. Basically don't hold yourself back.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, to end us, I didn't do this with the last couple of live stream sessions with the maker, and I didn't even prep questions, but I want to try to do a quick speed round of you have to answer the question I ask you. So bear with me because I'm going to come up with some questions on the fly. But first off, where is your favorite place to explore near LA?
Oh, near LA. I would say there's like maybe Mount Baldy area. It's the mountains kind of behind downtown, a little bit to the east. Nobody thinks of LA as a mountain place, but when it's not smoggy and not polluted, you can see the most beautiful mountains behind the city.
Cool. Haven't been there yet, but I need to get there. What about your favorite outdoor activity?
Backpacking.
And what is your favorite piece of gear you own?
Oh, it's got to be my backpacking backpack, because it's the one that I made. And it's the first type of gear I ever tried making. And I've taken it on probably like 3 or 4 trips now, and it's holding up. So that's pretty exciting.
Cool. Ocean trip or mountain trip?
Mountain.
Cool. And lastly, I'm curious about your favorite place you've ever lived.
Oh, I love DC. So many trees. Ever since I've been in LA, I'm like trying to figure out, how do I get more trees planted? Because all I see are people cutting down trees, and DC is just filled with trees, and they're so beautiful, and like the air is so clean over there.
Yeah, very cool. We've got an active DC chapter for people who tune in. So I've been talking to the chapter leader over there, and just the biking trails and the hiking trails and the Shenandoah Mountains.
It's so great.
I need to get there again.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm excited to check out your products because I really want to learn about those stories that are on the backside of the patches. And we're really thankful for the Mappy Hour giveaway that you're doing. So for anyone tuning in, just a reminder that you can enter through the end of the day. We'll send out one more reminder today on social, and we hope that you support Michelle in more of their creative endeavors. So thank you so much, and we will talk to everyone later.
Thank you.
See you.